With this inspiriting notion, her questions increased in number and meaning, and she particularly led Harriet to talk more of Mr. Martin, and there was evidently no dislike to it. Harriet was very ready to speak of the share he had had in their moonlight walks and merry evening games, and dwelt a good deal upon his being so very good-humoured and obliging. He'd gone 3 miles round one day in order to bring her some walnuts, because she'd said how fond she was of them, and in everything else he was so very obliging. He had his shepherd's son into the parlour one night on purpose to sing to her. She was very fond of singing. He could sing a little himself. She believed he was very clever and understood everything. He had a very fine flock, and while she was with them, he'd been bid more for his wool than anybody in the country. She believed everybody spoke well of him. His mother and sisters were very fond of him. Mrs. Martin had told her one day, and there was a blush as she said it, that it was impossible for anybody to be a better son, and therefore she was sure, whenever he married, he would make a good husband. Not that she wanted him to marry. She was in no hurry at all. "Well done, Mrs. Martin," thought Emma. "You know what you're about." And when she had come away, Mrs. Martin was so very kind as to send Mrs. Goddard a beautiful goose, the finest goose Mrs. Goddard had ever seen. Mrs. Goddard had dressed it on a Sunday and asked all the 3 teachers, Miss Nash and Miss Prince and Miss Richardson, to sup with her. Mr. Martin, I suppose, is not a man of information beyond the line of his own business. He does not read. Oh, yes. That is, no. I do not know, but I believe he's read a good deal, but not what you would think anything of. He reads the agricultural reports, and some other books that lay in one of the window seats, but he reads all them to himself. But sometimes of an evening, before we went to cards, he would read something aloud out of the elegant extracts. Very entertaining. And I know he's read The Vicar of Wakefield. He never read The Romance of the Forest, nor The Children of the Abbey. He'd never heard of such books before I mentioned them, but he's determined to get them now as soon as ever he can. The next question was, what sort of looking man is Mr. Martin? Oh, not handsome, not at all handsome. I thought him very plain at first, but I do not think him so plain now. One does not, you know, after a time. But did you never see him? He's in Highbury every now and then, and he's sure to ride through every week in his way to Kingston. He's passed you very often. Oh, that may be, and I may have seen him 50 times, but without having any idea of his name. A young farmer, whether on horseback or on foot, is the very last sort of person to raise my curiosity. The yeomanry are precisely the order of people with whom I feel I can have nothing to do. A degree or 2 lower, and a creditable appearance, might interest me. I might hope to be useful to their families in some way or other. But a farmer can need none of my help, and is therefore, in one sense, as much above my notice as in every other he is below it. To be sure. Oh, yes, it is not likely you should ever have observed him, but he knows you very well indeed. I mean by sight. I have no doubt of his being a very respectable young man. I know indeed that he is so, and as such wish him well. What do you imagine his age to be? He was 24, the 8th of last June, and my birthday's the 23rd, just a fortnight and a day's difference, which is very odd.